Hello, Rank Squad. When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Aloe or Allbirds or Aviator Nation, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand and brilliant marketing, but an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the businesses, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify, who are home of the number one checkout on the planet. And the not so secret with Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning that there are way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going. So, if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling, on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. It's no secret, businesses that want to grow with Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/ranks, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/ranks to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/ranks.
Hello, this is international football commentator Derek Ray, and you're listening to the Ranks FC podcast.
Hello Rank Squad and welcome to Champions League Takeaway here on Ranks FC. Looking back at all the action from this week's Champions League, the first legs of these round of 16 ties, and there's been a lot of drama for us to get stuck into. My name is Jack Collins and I'll be your host today, and joining me across the water all the way from San Diego, Mr. Dean Jones. How you doing, mate?
Hello, mate. Yeah, very good. Not too many surprises thrown up, really, over the course of these 8 games that we've seen on Tuesday and Wednesday. Perhaps the number of goals that Arsenal scored was a slight surprise, but there was no real upset to speak of. But that doesn't mean that it's all dead. There's plenty still on the line here. We've got a few ties that are still in the balance, and a couple of big clubs could go. So we've still got a bit to analyse here.
Yeah, some nicely balanced ties, I think. And yes, while you suggest that most of the teams you expected to win ended up on the right side of their score lines, some of the performances didn't quite match that either, which we'll get stuck into. So I'm going to give you the floor. Where do you want to start with from Wednesday's action?
Let's start with the one I've just watched, which is the Bayern Munich game. They've just dispatched Bayer Leverkusen by 3-0. Underlining really why I had them 4th in my power rankings to win the Champions League as we got to the last 16. Honestly, write this side off at your own risk. This is the thing, right? So Bayer Leverkusen came out going for it, and I was like, oh, they're trying to rattle them here straight away. And for the first few minutes, I really was thinking, oh, they're going to score an early goal here, and that is going to make things really interesting. They're just trying to force Upamecano or Kim into an error, and that is definitely easy to see happening. And then what happened was that Kim picked up an injury really early, 4th minute or something. And he went down for a while. It looked really bad at first. It looked like his ankle looked twisted in a really weird way. So they stopped play for a while he got treatment. It turned out he was okay. But during that period, it just gave Bayern Munich a chance to be come on, settle down. And straight from that, they kind of regained composure, kept the ball for a minute. And it was a few minutes later that they get this movement. Kane spreads the ball out wide. It's actually behind Elise, but he recollects it. He brings the ball in. He sends a cross in towards the far post. And Harry Kane, with just one of the best headers you'll ever see, quite frankly. He comes in on the blind side of the defender, gets in front of him. Absolutely perfect timing. The perfect header into the corner of the net. Exactly why I believe that Bayern Munich make the semi-finals, at least, of the Champions League, because they have such experience on the pitch. Go through from the goalkeeper Neuer all the way up to Harry Kane. Every area of the pitch has strengths. Now, obviously it's the back line that is the most feeble, right? And that is why Leverkusen were trying to rattle them. But when they failed to do that, Bayern Munich were able to kind of like grab a hold of the game. And then, Leverkusen are kind of stuck once their goalkeeper makes an absolute howler in the second half.
They have a penalty disallowed, don't they, by VAR?
Yeah.
Kind of one of those ones that could change the outcome of the game, etc.
Yeah, but I mean, I just feel like they could never maintain the rhythm that they looked to be building early on, and that really hurt them. But I mean, the mistake where he drops the ball from across or just doesn't even collect it.
Yeah,
it's such a big mistake in the context of this tie. You're not even 10 minutes into the second half. You need to get that next goal. Can't go 2 goals behind against Bayern Munich. And a deep cross comes in from Kimmich. And Hermoso's kind of just like seeing the ball back to the keeper go over. And he looks away because he's caught it. I've just seen him go up. He's caught the ball. He turns around, he's not even looking. And he looks back. It's like despaired. He looks kind of his goalkeeper as Musiala's just like prodding it into the empty net. And they're kind of like, oh. And then they go down to 10 men because Mukiele gets a red card. And I felt sorry for him, actually, because he definitely didn't mean to put his studs down the back of Coman in the way that he did. And he had an absolute look of despair on his face as he realised what he'd actually done. Watch it in slow-mo. Like his face, I really feel for the guy. But it's a red card. And then Harry Kane wraps it all up from the spot where he sticks it into the top corner. It's 3-0 Bayern Munich. The tie is dead. Frimpong and Wirtz were taken off like 10 minutes from time. And they both looked like they were crying on the bench. They were like, Wirtz totally had lost his head and literally looked like he was going to burst into tears. Frimpong was shouting at him. I don't know whether he was shouting at Wirtz for something or just shouting generally at what they were annoyed about. I don't know if they were annoyed at the goalkeeper for his error. I don't know if they were annoyed at something else. But yeah, it was a lot of emotions on that Leverkusen bench. But they're out now. They're out. They're not turning that around. I don't think. Like I find it very hard to believe.
No. Like I'd be surprised. I really rate this Leverkusen team. To quote a text I got from our great friend Sam Tai, he said, "Do you think Xabi Alonso has Guardiola'd this?" And it got me thinking. So you look at this lineup that Leverkusen played with. They ended up playing Grimaldo and Frimpong, who have been the best wing backs in world football, I would say, over the past 18 months, playing as actual wingers in front of Mukiele and Hincapié. You have no striker. Patrick Schick's having an absolute hell of a season, and they go with Florian Wirtz and Mini Adli up top as a pair. Means they're a man down in the midfield battle. And he drops Lukas Radetzky, his captain, for Matej Kovar. Radetzky was excellent in the game against Eintracht at the weekend, and he has dropped here inexplicably for Matej Kovar, who does that in the game, who makes that error that completely and utterly flips the trajectory of this from difficult to almost impossible. And I think that when you're looking at what this team is and where they were so good last season, where they've been so good at points this season, I do understand that you have to push forward, right? I do understand that you have to continue to tactically adapt and evolve. But this just felt like, I looked at this lineup even before the game started and went, what on earth is he doing? Like, what on earth is he doing with this lineup? I wonder if he's just overthought it. He's a young manager still making his way in the game. And look, so is Company, but Company has stuck to his guns. He's stuck to the exact system that's worked. To his credit, that's the first time I've seen Goretzka and Kimmich work as a defensive midfield pair. And I think that was because they had a man advantage in the middle. They've been overwhelmed all season long when games have gone against them in these kind of ways. I just wonder if Xabi Alonso thought, I think they know what we're going to do, so we're going to do something completely different. And it just didn't work almost at all.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, honestly, I think that, as I say, that injury that Kim went down, I honestly think that saved Bayern Munich in that moment. And I think, actually, Leverkusen would have gone on to take the lead. I really do. It needed something to stunt that start to the game that they'd had. So difficult to say, really, because before you knew it, like 9 minutes in, Leverkusen are a goal behind. And, they've got the goal from a moment out of nothing, almost like a cross that's from a long way away. It's a great ball from Alisson. But again, you're talking about a header from Harry Kane. He's one of probably 5 players in the world that would have scored that opportunity. It was just ridiculous. So it's really hard to know. I take your point. And maybe on a deeper level, then yeah. But yeah, ultimately, Bayern were just able to execute a game plan. And because of the experience they had on the pitch, it didn't really matter that they've got a pretty amateur Champions League manager on the bench. I know a lot of people's concern about Bayern Munich is that Vincent Kompany's in charge of them. For this one, it didn't matter. Maybe in the next one, when they probably play Inter Milan, we'll discover whether Kompany can do it then. But for now, yeah, the battle of the bosses, you expect Alonso to come up, and maybe he did overthink it.
First time that he's ever lost to Bayern as Leverkusen manager, which
Fair
is
time to do it.
Really, really poor time for that to do. It was nuts. I thought that this is the first time they've ever met in the Champions League, these two. Actually, it's the first time they've ever met in European competition, which is something that you kind of just don't really expect. But
Leverkusen haven't been good for that long.
No, I know, but you remember the Leverkusen side that got to the Champions League final in, what was it, 2001, 2002?
Yeah, these are in the periods that have happened. Yeah, true.
Yeah, ups and downs, but just one of those things. But I thought it was an interesting thing. But yeah, just a really tough night for Leverkusen. And you know what? I really had some faith that they'd work this out and they'd really get into this Bayern unit, and it just didn't seem to work out on kind of any level for them today. And I wonder if it's one of those things, and I'm sure that Xabi Alonso will come back and be like, "Look, we'll learn lessons from this. We'll understand." And I think he will understand that he's made mistakes in that as well. But with all that said and done, I think you're probably right. I would be absolutely stunned if Leverkusen, even with all the attacking potential they have, can turn that around at the Bayer Arena. So probably job done for Bayern Munich, I think, in the all-German affair between the Bundesliga's 1 and 2 right now. Should we come on to Paris? And PSG 0, Liverpool 1. Now, I've got some things to say. One, this might have been the biggest smash and grab job in Champions League knockout history in terms of the balance of play, in terms of one team having to just dig in and defend for 90 minutes and scoring a winner with pretty much their first shot on target in the game. Now, there are caveats to that. One of them is that probably the best defensive or goalkeeping performance you've ever seen from Alisson Becker. It was astounding. It was like he had magnets in his gloves. And, we talk about Thibaut Courtois in Champions League finals, in big moments in the Champions League, coming up like a wall. Well, Alisson just put his hand up and went, "Oh, by the way, you've all been saying Courtois is the best in the world and you've forgotten about me. Like, I'm the man." This was incredible in so many different ways. And I'm kind of like loath to give Liverpool credit, because as much as I really like this Liverpool team, I thought PSG were unbelievable tonight. I thought that they put together one of those performances that on another night they score not just 1 or 2, but 4 or 5. And Alisson almost single-handedly kept Liverpool in this game. Now, there were good defensive contributions. I thought that Trent Alexander-Arnold in particular defended really, really well. And actually, at one point, Kvara was causing absolute havoc down the right-hand side in the first pitch. And he was absolutely teasing Andy Robertson. And it was almost like a half-time. PSG decided, they were like, Kvara's playing well. Let's put him up against Trent. And actually, Trent dealt with it really, really well in many, many ways. And I thought he was probably Liverpool's best defender. It was a really impressive. Liverpool sat in that deep block that we saw at times against Manchester City. But whereas Liverpool had just kept City at arm's length, it was like PSG were just galvanized from moment one to drive at this team. Now, Kvara has a wonderful goal chalked out for offside. He is offside, but he's coming back. So that there's no advantage when he gets the word. It doesn't matter, and that's not what the rule is or how it works. But it's just one of those where you're watching it going, the back of his, basically like his calf is offside. whilst he's coming back to collect the ball. And you're like,
Dumb
there's
rule.
clearly no advantage played. It's the correct decision. I'm not trying to argue with that. But it's one of those frustrating ones. You're like, we've been denied a wonderful goal by something that just really didn't affect the run of play at all. And then there's also this decision, and I don't know if you've been able to see this back yet, with Ibrahima Konate, where he is the last man and he is chasing down Bradley Barcola and he shoves him in the back. And yes, you could argue it's sort of shoulder to shoulder. It's shoulder to back. It's not shoulder to shoulder. His shoulder hits Barcola between the numbers on his shirt. Right? That's where the contact is made. And the referee waves play on. The referee's in a really good position. And they're showing the replays. And almost everyone is like, well, he's obviously going to be sent to the monitor. That's a foul. And it's a red card.
Yeah.
And he doesn't get sent to the monitor. And I think it's important to remember that like not all contact is a foul. This is a contact sport, etc., etc. But there's no attempt to play the ball whatsoever. He is just trying to shove Barcola in the back. And whether that's to put him off or to knock him over, we will never know. But I think this is a red card. And I think Liverpool get away with one a little bit here, because I think considering the waves of pressure, the siege the PSG were putting on their goal with 11 men, I think potentially with 10, the dam might have burst. And if the dam burst, Liverpool were in real trouble. But it didn't. Yeah. And they stuck it out and they defended really well. And they forced PSG love to shoot from range, right? This is a thing that they do. You know, these players in the kind of forward line of Dembele loves a strike from distance. Barcola loves a strike from distance. Desire Doué, when he came off the bench, loves a strike from distance. So does Kvara. So there is an element of, okay, PSG like to hit him from distance anyway, so it's not necessarily forced. But I thought that Liverpool got a lot of men behind the ball when they really needed to, and they really did dig in. Really quiet night for Mo Salah. Did almost nothing, misplaced a few passes, was substituted. And this, I suppose, comes on to the next point, which is that Arne Slot got his substitutions absolutely bang on. He makes this double change, and he brings on Harvey Elliott for Mo Salah, and he brings on Darwin Núñez through the middle. And the kind of thought, I suppose, that you're looking at that going, they're happy with the point. They're really happy with the point. And they should have been, right? Like, without being funny, if Liverpool had come out of that game at 0-0 at the final whistle, their fans there in the stadium would have been like, that is a result. We're back to Anfield. It's all square. And we fancy ourselves against Danny Potty at Anfield. And rightly so, right? The fact that the next thing that happens is a long ball from Alisson, who else, goes up into this area. Darwin does brilliantly, takes it down, brings it on, and just lays it perfectly into the path of Elliott, who's in acres of space. And here's the difference between the two teams. Donnarumma gets a hand to it, but it squeezes past him and goes into the back of the net. And down one end, you have a keeper who has thrown out things that were just spectacular, some absolutely outrageous saves pulled off. And at the other, you have a keeper who didn't have loads to do all night. But when he did, when the big moment came, who ended up being too weak-wristed, shall we say, to keep it out. Now, maybe that's being a bit harsh. It is a good finish. It's across the keeper, etc., etc. But he gets a hand to it. And I think if you'd put that down the other end, Alisson keeps it out. And PSG outmatched Liverpool in 10 positions out of the 11 on the pitch today. And the one place they didn't has cost them in the end. And ultimately, that's what it comes down to. Can this PSG side go and win in Europe, can win the Champions League with Donnarumma in goal? I don't know. At this point, I really don't know. And I think it's testament to just how good everyone else is that we're talking about this. A Liverpool side who have been nigh on perfect all season, completely and utterly outplayed for the first time this season. And yet, they come away with a 1-0 win, and it feels like it might just be one of those seasons where everything is going to come up Liverpool.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, I was obviously watching another game at the time, but I saw some of the highlights, and it was basically just Alisson making saves. And a few of them were like kind of those one-on-ones that we expect him to save, but not all of them were just one-on-one. So afterwards, Alisson has described it as probably the best performance of my life. That's how good it was. That's what PSG had to beat today. One of the best goalkeepers in the world, one of the best goalkeepers we've ever seen in the Premier League, playing the best he has ever played. That's how unlucky PSG were tonight to have come up against that. They've had like 10 shots on target and not scored one. Really, that's really unfortunate.
10 shots on target for PSG, no goals. 1 shot on target for Liverpool, 1 goal. But more than that, 27 shots for PSG which is the most I think Liverpool have conceded. It was definitely the most they've conceded in the first half under Arne Slot. I think it's the most they've conceded full stop in a game.
Stats are so lopsided. It's just unbelievable. 71% possession. PSG, 14 corners. Liverpool had 2. Like
the stats don't always tell the story of a game, right? But in this case, they do.
Yeah, absolutely.
They really do. And actually, one of the stats I really like is field tilt. Show you where the game was played, etc. It was 79% PSG in terms of they camped in Liverpool's half. And every time, it wasn't like, sometimes you see Liverpool in that Man City game. I think it's a fair comparison, right? In the Man City game, every time Liverpool got the ball in transition, they looked like they were going to score. Tonight, they didn't. There were some unbelievable defensive performances from PSG as well. They just kept shutting them off. Nuno Mendes handled Mo Salah. Handled him every time he got the ball. Some really, really good one-on-one defending. Some nicks away from the players. There were some really, really special moments from him. And it almost felt at points in the first half. Like there's one moment where Liverpool have a corner and it bounces back out to Salah and it's sort of pinballing around a bit. And Nuno Mendes just eases him off the ball and then runs the ball down his own goal line, towards the corner flag and plays the pass out. And you're like, wow, they're not scared at all. They're not scared at all of the Liverpool side. And I suppose, whilst Liverpool obviously would have been favourites, even if it was 0-0, I would argue that Liverpool probably would have been favourites with the bookies, even if it was 1-0 PSG going into the game against Anfield. But I think that PSG won't be scared of going to Anfield. And I think that might be the only thing that kind of brings them back into this. I don't think they're going to be terrified. I think what they will come back into the dressing room in that performance, they'll be deflated. Their heads will be down. Of course they will. They'll be like, how on earth have we lost that game? But I think that Luis Enrique will say to them, you play like that again, and we have every chance of going through.
Yeah, I mean, there's less to fear. Now that you're losing anyway, there's less to fear. The problem is you get hit on the break. That's the thing.
Danger. They handled the transition so well until the 90th minute. And I know that it's the game is the game, right? Like football is stupid sometimes, but also you have to play for whistle to whistle, right? You can't, you don't just sort of stop at 90. You have to play it all the way through. But I think that they will look at it and say, we can go and do this and we can open things up. And we handled Liverpool's first team in transition today pretty comfortably until Darwin came on. And look, the much maligned man, the man who divides fans like no other, I thought it was brilliant when he came on. Darwin came on and Gonzalo Ramos came on. Obviously, 2 former Benfica number 9s. And they made all of the difference because Darwin changes the game one end and Gonzalo Ramos can't really get into it as the number 9 at the other. And that's the difference between PSG winning this game 1-0 and Liverpool winning it 1-0.
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting, obviously, as well. I mean, obviously so much to play for here for PSG, but also they'd probably hope that Liverpool have a tough game to come in between these 2 fixtures. And unfortunately for them, Liverpool have got Southampton at home next. And it's not often, in fact, it's basically never that you see Mo Salah given a rest or whatever. But against Southampton, I was going to say no offence to Southampton, but it really is quite offensive. You can put out the kids if you want and beat them next week because the way they've been playing, you and I might get a game, mate, and hope to have a goal against Saints.
But also, it's like one of those nice things where like Harvey Elliott comes on, scores the winner, is the hero, absolutely loving life. He gets to start the weekend, right? Like, you get rewarded,
so,
inverted commas, right? Like that's probably the way you probably look at it.
Yeah,
exactly. It was weird though because Liverpool had been second best to every ball pretty much across the game, apart from in their own defensive area. And as soon as they went 1-0 up, like Curtis Jones started winning tackles on the box at the edge of the opposition box. You're like, has the mentality just flipped? And it was like,
it's adrenaline, probably, isn't it, as well?
It's like Liverpool could score another one now.
Yeah, I mean,
out of nowhere.
Talked about this recently about that feeling that comes with a goal, and like you kind of feel untouchable in the minutes after a big goal because you're pumped, and it does give you an extra yard. It does give you an extra edge. So possibly that's where that would have come from. Look, Liverpool, Slot said himself the other day when he was talking about the Premier League, like you don't win a Premier League title by playing brilliantly for 38 games. You have to dig in and accept that sometimes it's not going to be that exciting to watch, but you get a result that you needed. Maybe this was one of those days. Maybe this was a moment when Liverpool had to just stay in the game, dig deep, and hope that something fell their way. And in the end, it has. Wasn't it an Alisson long pass as well that's actually led to the goal from what I've seen? Alisson not only has stopped PSG from scoring, he's actually turned out with the assist before the assist that actually carved them open in the end. That's what it's taken to do PSG today.
Just a word that Joao Neves and Vitinha were just mesmerising in the middle of the park. Joao Neves at one point got the ball and did a couple of keepy uppies over a couple of Liverpool players and then just came out the other side. And you're like, you can't be doing this. He's fully taking the piss. This Liverpool midfield has been almost untouchable all season.
Nice.
And they were running rings around them. It was, in so many ways, it was an incredible performance from PSG. And I wish I'd been able, not because I wish Liverpool any ill, but because I wish I'd been able to sit here and talk about a 2-0 PSG victory, because I would have been able to give them their due props because of the way that they played today. But they weren't able to finish those chances. They came up against a man on fire. And sometimes that's just the way the cookie crumbles. All right, let's quickly talk about the other two games. Barcelona did themselves a bit of a smash and grab job, actually, because they won 1-0 at Benfica. But the big talking point was that Pau Cubarsí was sent off after 20 minutes of this game. And what I thought was interesting about this is you'll remember that the first game of this Champions League campaign, which incidentally is the only game that Barcelona have lost, was a loss to Monaco. And that happened because Barcelona went down to 10 men really early. And despite playing really well in La Liga at that point, Eric Garcia, I think, was sent off in that game. And Monaco took advantage. What I thought was really interesting today, especially against Benfica, who were the team that knocked out Monaco in the previous round, a team that scored 4 times against Barcelona when these two teams met last. After 20 minutes, when that happens, you're like, oh no, Barcelona could be in real trouble. They could get annihilated here because Benfica have been quite open at both ends, right? I think there was 32 goals in their 10 games in the Champions League up to this point. So we're talking 3 goals a game on average. It's been quite wild. And you're like, oh God, if this game becomes a basketball match, it's not going to suit Barcelona anymore. And we saw a different side of Barcelona tonight. They actually did adapt. They dug in, they played deep, they hit on the break, they hit in transition, and they probably created the better chances over the course of the 90 minutes. Now, Benfica obviously had a bit of a siege going on towards the end of things, but the goal is wonderful. Rafinha seizes on a misplaced pass from Antonio Silva, but he's still 30 yards out. He then skates a man and fires one into the bottom corner from outside the box. And that is the mark of a man on fire. Now, it had been quite, there had been moments for both teams. Dani Olmo nearly scored. He was the one who was replaced when Cubarsí was sent off. He nearly scored early on. Trubin makes an unbelievable triple save. There's a reprieve for Barcelona late on because Szczesny comes out and trips over Belotti, but he's called for a very, very narrow offside call. Lots of things happened. But what I was most taken with from this game was that Barcelona, so contrary to that first game against Monaco, where they basically just tried to play the game out anyway, and they ended up losing, they were really, really smart with how they dealt with the fact that they were a man down for 70 minutes of this game. And they frustrated Benfica. There was a really weird moment where just after Barcelona had a man sent off and everyone was kind of losing their heads a bit, loads of Benfica fans just set off loads of fireworks in the stadium. And the whole game had to be paused for 5 minutes. And like you said about the Kim injury, it was like Barcelona just took a minute to reset. And from then on, the game plan worked, not to perfection because Benfica had chances and Szczesny was still called into action a couple of times. But from then on, it felt like they were far more settled in what they had to do. And I wonder if those fans are like, that was actually quite stupid in so many ways, because just as the moment we kind of got the offensive, got the man advantage and we're looking to push it, the game was stopped for 5 minutes because no one could see. So, yeah, I mean, just something to think about. But most importantly, that Barcelona adaptation, I mean, wasn't Lamine Yamal's night, wasn't Lewandowski's night. But again, Rafinha steps up in a moment like that and he scores a glorious winner. And Barcelona have the advantage, the 1-0 advantage, going back into this second leg.
Yeah, he's the man. It's good for La Liga as well in terms of the title race because they play Barcelona play Atletico Madrid in the first game back after that second leg, and the last thing that Atleti would have wanted would be that Barcelona can kind of just take their foot off the gas in the second leg if they had a few goals in the bag already from this first one. But that's not going to be the case at all. Barca are going to have to be at it in that Champions League second leg, which makes again La Liga more intriguing. So I think this was for the best that it went this way, mate, and that they've had to work for the win.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you mentioned them earlier, but we should finish with Inter, who won 2-0 at Feyenoord. This was mature, is the word I would describe Inter's performance here. They were under the cosh a little bit earlier on, and Feyenoord looked probably the more dangerous side in the first half. But the second chance that comes Inter's way, they take really, really good finish from Marcus Thuram. Like, he's up in the air, very acrobatic, lovely cross from Barella. But considering Inter were playing without a recognised left wing back because all of them are currently injured, I enjoyed Inzaghi's quote on this. He basically said before the game, he was like, I have 5 wing backs in my squad. 4 of them can play on the left. Those are the 4 that are injured. And I was like, oh yeah, that does actually make some sense. And I wondered how he was going to play it and what it was going to look like. But they did okay. And then basically they go in at half time, and Feyenoord are obviously a little bit upset with everything that's going on. And obviously they now have Robin van Persie as their manager, who is new to this. This was his first game in the Champions League as a manager ever. And after the break, Inter just come out. Lautaro scores a brilliant goal, which makes him the outright Inter top scorer ever in either the European Cup or the Champions League. One more, 18 goals now, one more than the legendary Sandro Mazzola. And also his 6th Champions League goal of the season, which is the most he's ever scored. But mostly another clean sheet for Inter. They've now kept a clean sheet in 9 of the games, 8 of the 9 games that they've played in the Champions League this season, which is an 88.9% ratio. It's the highest proportion ever by a team in a single season in the Champions League. They've conceded 1 goal, Dean. And you kind of think Feyenoord will be looking to go to San Siro now and trying to stand an impossible task. And I thought there was some interesting kind of comments around this game from the kind of people commentating on it, etc. And one of them was that, I think it was Jolien Lescott after the game that said, this is as good as the Arsenal result in terms of being done. Is that there is absolutely no way on earth that Inter concede twice to this Feyenoord side at San Siro. And I thought it was a pretty salient point.
Yeah, I mean, there was an opportunity for this game to open up, but it was in that first 25 minutes when Inter really couldn't find their groove. They couldn't get things going. They weren't on the top of their game. And even in those moments, like Feyenoord they didn't have that cutting edge that is needed to beat a team that is this well set up, I guess is the best way to describe it. And as soon as Inter do start to get a grip on the game and they score before half time, you're up against it. So 2-0. I'm not say quite as far as they got it as good as Arsenal, but I totally understand the sentiment behind it because, Feyenoord, if they go there and they score in the first 5 minutes, then maybe they can do something. But
they're beset with injuries as well, Feyenoord. I know Inter have their own injury problems.
Inter aren't going to concede in the first 5 minutes. That's the problem you got. They're going to be like, right, this is what we play for. We love days like this. Let's just defend. Perfect.
Yeah, they're gonna sit in. Barella was excellent here, but also a word for the Feyenoord keeper, Timon Wellenreuther, who saved a penalty from Zielinski and had no chance with either of the goals. But I genuinely thought put in quite a good performance apart from that. And it's not often you get praise as a goalkeeper when your team loses 2-0 at home. But I thought he probably deserved a little bit of credit considering how things went. Right, we're going to take a break there, and afterwards we'll come on to Tuesday's action, including that Madrid derby and Arsenal going 7-up on PSV. Don't go anywhere. Hello, Rag Squad. When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Allo or Allbirds or Aviator Nation, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand and brilliant marketing, but an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the businesses, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify, who are home of the #1 checkout on the planet. And the not so secret with Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning that there are way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going So, if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling, on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. It's no secret, businesses that want to grow with Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/ranks, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/ranks to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/ranks. Welcome back to Champions League Takeaway here on Ranks FC, where it's time to look at Tuesday's Champions League action. And Dean, whilst Arsenal fans will be upset that we're not starting with them after their performance, I do think we should probably start with the Madrid derby, which I think to most people was the pick of every game from this round.
It was so absorbing. Like, what a game. I loved it. It was just such a brilliant game to take in. Both teams looked like they had the quality to win. I was to say quality, that's probably the wrong word for Real Madrid, but they had the ability to win the game. But it was kind of swinging end to end, and you weren't really sure which way the momentum was going to stick. But it was a great goal from both sides that kind of gets it going to 1-1, and then Brahim kind of has the final say to win it early on in the second half. A strange game, though, to analyse, because when you consider the players that you would expect to turn up for one like this for Real Madrid, obviously you would be thinking, right, this is it. I always talk about this is when Vinny gets going. Vinicius Jr. will probably make a difference in a game like this. If he doesn't, Mbappe will. And actually, both of them were quiet. Mbappe, arguably poor, to be honest. A chance even to wrap it up at 3-1 right at the death. His pass was a little askew. Certainly not the player that we saw banging a hat-trick against Man City. But thankfully for Real Madrid, they still have that big game mentality. They still have those big characters and players that will step forward in moments of need.
They still have Rodrigo.
They have Rodrigo. Yeah, and they have Valverde as well, mate. And Valverde, just an absolute king. The way he plays that role that is, unaccustomed to, but is becoming accustomed to. And the pass that he makes in the first goal is just wild. It's so perfect. I mean, there was plenty of times, actually, when Atletico looked like they might have joy going straight through the middle of Real Madrid's team. But equally, Real did pretty well at turning it the other way as well in big moments. So, yeah, really impressed as usual with Valverde. Thought he made a huge difference to them being able to get through this game.
Big call as well, playing him at right back. Not that he's not good there, he's excellent there, but his energy in the midfield against this kind of dogs of war Atleti mentality is one of the things that Real Madrid can kind of throw fire at fire, right?
Yeah,
and
we'll see,
starting at right back takes away from that a little bit because he's not quite as there, but I thought he was really, really impressive in the way that he shut down that wing, right? And it basically was such an impressive performance down that side. What I thought was interesting about this game was that obviously Rodrigo scores early and it's a brilliant goal. He's such a wonderful footballer. I found a fun stat for you, actually. Only 5 players have scored 25 or more Champions League goals for Real Madrid in the Champions League era. Cristiano Ronaldo, Karim Benzema, Raul, Vinicius Jr., and now Rodrigo. He's got 3 goals less than Vinicius. And yes, okay, fine. Some of those Vinicius goals have come at major, major moments, but so have Rodrigo's. And when people talk about the superstars of this team, when people were talking about the big 3, etc., it was Mbappe, Vinicius, and Bellingham. They were the 3 that people talked about. Rodrigo goes under the radar. And I know that's not necessarily to say that no one appreciates him, because that would be stupid. People know how good Rodrigo is. But I don't know if they know how good Rodrigo is. The way that he scores this goal is absolutely sublime. And behind Saka and Salah, not necessarily in that order. Well, definitely not in that order, in fact. I think you struggle to name a better right winger on the planet. He is that good. He is Lamine Yamal, maybe, actually. But we kind of put him in that conversation. And I think that sometimes he gets overlooked because of the superstar names around him, of the kind of fuss that Real Madrid make of Vinicius Jr. at times, for right and for wrong, with the Ballon d'Or thing, but also that they celebrate him and his successes, and rightly so. I think with Mbappe then coming in, with Bellingham, these are big names signed for huge fees, right? And Rodrigo sometimes slides under the radar with that. But what he does for this first goal is sublime. But from that moment, like Real Madrid, like, oh, okay, we're going to attack that flank. We're going to go down that flank and really hit Atleti down the left. And Atleti score a goal kind of out of nothing, right? The equalizer comes out of nothing, and it's brilliant, beautiful from Julian Alvarez, like a proper screamer. The kind of goal you dream of scoring, the way that it bends in off that far post is majestic. But it then kind of flips again, and it's like, okay, start the second half. Atleti have a lot of the ball. They're really looking to push, to get that second, and really put themselves in the tie. And kind of against the run of play, Real Madrid score, and then Atleti are pushing for the equalizer, and Real Madrid nearly score again. It just felt weird that like the team in the ascendancy was not the one that looked most like scoring. I think at times, and that is a strange way to view a game.
Yeah, definitely. And it's really hard, honestly, to know like which way this will go in the second leg. I mean, the second leg is poised really nicely because I don't think Real Madrid are going to have that all their own way. Obviously, they've got a couple of big selection dilemmas. Camavinga was pretty poor. So you got to wonder whether he plays. And if he doesn't play, do you bring Luka Modric back in for a game of that much energy? That how difficult that's going to be in that game to kind of control the middle. Like, do you risk? Can Modric still do that? Don't know, but Camavinga certainly couldn't handle it on this occasion. And
does
then
Valverde go back into the middle?
Does
and
Valverde come back in?
Can
Can you put someone else right back, or does he do so well there that then you're opening yourself up to other problems? And of course, Jude Bellingham's available again for the next one, which probably comes at a risk to Brahim Diaz. And
we haven't even got to yet.
Yeah, which we haven't even begun to address.
Twinkletoes. Like, it was really funny. I don't know if it was the same on your commentary feeds, but I think it was Stephen McManaman watching it who like physically couldn't believe that Brahim had like dropped his like shot, like his ankle down to the ground as if he was going to go over on it before he like flicks back inside. He's like, I don't know if it's a trick or he's actually just nearly fallen over. And I was like, I think he's trying to do it, man. I think he's trying to throw his body weight and go. But he was like, we were watching the goal was going over and over and over, and just like couldn't get over this ankle drop. And it was really amusing how often it was going over. It was like, still thinking about that ankle. And I'm like, come on now, move on with the game. Like, we need the rest of the commentary going on. But the kind of nimbleness to dance through in that moment from Brahim, and I was delighted for him because this felt like a really big moment. And he's had a few, right? But he has had to play his second fiddle. He has had to wait his turn. I think he's become, only the second or third player ever to score for Real Madrid against Atleti in 3 different competitions, which is kind of mental. Mm-hmm. But equally, his time at Real Madrid has felt like it's been stop-start all the way through. There's kind of always felt like there's this moment. But when he comes on and does something like that, his work rate yesterday was absolutely immense. And I tweeted about this, but I was like, one of the, when people ask you what's your favorite type of player, what I've decided is like technical wizards with an absolutely ridiculous work rate. I talk a lot about Bernardo. I talk a lot about Griezmann. I think Alvarez fits into this category. Rodrigo does as well, actually, in some ways, because of the way that he tucks back into the 4 in defense. Joao Neves, Vitinha. These are players you hear me speak about all the time. But Brahim belongs in that category too. And I think that when you look at what the shift he put in the middle yesterday to try and combat that midfield is the reason I think that Real Madrid didn't miss Valverde quite as much in the middle of the park. And I think that's really important to note.
Yeah, well, he won his battles. That was key. He's definitely not a player that you would want to be regularly in central midfield.
Well, I think he was playing the 10, but he basically had to drop back in because of the nature of the game, right?
Yeah, totally. But he doesn't really misplace passes. He's careful on the ball. He's precise on the ball. His passing selection's usually good. When he's got to go, he'll go, and you can trust him to come up with some magic from time to time too, which he'll do. So, fantastic player to have in the team, and that's why it makes it an even bigger dilemma to decide you're going to drop him for the second leg to make room for somebody else. So that's for Carlo Ancelotti to deal with. But look, Atleti can be more than happy, really, and in fact, probably slightly unhappy. They've come away with the the defeat, I thought they did very well in the first half. Probably the better team. You're coming out of a battle at the Bernabeu where you're almost 50-50 possession overall. Okay, you haven't had as much threat on goal, but you've still done enough to stay in the tie and show that you could potentially have your moments even late on. So I think it was fine from Atleti. They'll perhaps feel that they could have done a little more in the second half, I think. Even when, Camavinga was eventually taken off. Maybe they didn't make enough of the fact that Camavinga was this off his game. But
it tailed off a little bit. And there was a bit of a weird change at one point where Simeone
they made
went
loads
to
of subs over the course of 10 minutes. They brought on like 5 subs, but over the course of like 10 minutes.
Yeah, but it was the one where they went to a 5 at the back, and it was like, are you playing for the 2-1? Because that is wild, considering how this game has been. But look, I heard Conor Gallagher talking about it afterwards, and he was like, we're still confident. And you know what, the old phrase, the old adage on this podcast, that a tie poised at 2-1 or 1 goal up to the away side in a 2-legged affair is basically level. I think probably comes into play here. I think that this is perfectly poised for the second leg.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it'll be a great one. I'm really looking forward to it. But this was a really, really good game.
Yeah, it was indeed. All right, it's time. Let's talk about Arsenal. Let's talk about 7 goals. Let's talk about the fact that held scoreless for the 2 goals coming into this one against PSV. Let's talk about the fact that they've scored 6 goals combined in their previous 6 away games. And then they go and do this. Hey, Arsenal answered some questions last night.
Well, they did, mate, but they were also up against possibly the worst goalkeeper I've ever seen play in the knockouts of the Champions League. Walter Benitez had an absolute nightmare. Like, he should save at least 3 of them. I think, like, from a defensive point of view, like, this was... Oh, I think I texted you saying this is disgraceful. I think it was you, I text.
You texted me saying PSV should not be allowed in the Champions League next year.
Oh, did I? Yeah, I texted my other mates. I was like, this is actually a disgrace to concede 7 goals at home in the last 16 tie of the Champions League. Arsenal were good. They were very good, but they were allowed to be that good. Like, and it's done Arsenal a world of good from a confidence perspective. I mean, they've got, you're here with a team that is become known for the fact that they can't score goals. Like, they've not got Saka, Havertz, Jesus, Martinelli. They're really thin on the ground. Like, we're seeing them play Mourinho up front, right? But do you know what helps is if you put up against one of the worst goalkeepers you could ever imagine. Unfortunately for PSV, that's what they had in goal for them on the night here.
Been okay for PSV as well. And it just feels like everything at PSV is completely and utterly falling apart. It's a really weird situation because they were in complete control of this season. In November, they were streets ahead in the Eredivisie title race. They've now all but lost that. I made a bad call on it on the Postbox Extra or on Ranks on the Patreon earlier, that Ajax have won the league. They have completely and utterly capitulated. They lost twice in a row to go ahead Eagles, once in the Cup and once in the league, which means that they're out of that now as well. They're out of the Champions League because there's absolutely no way they're going to win by 6 at the Emirates. They've just, we talked about this the other week, right? When I was talking about their performance against Juventus, and things were stuttering a bit in the league at that point. But they came up against this Juve side, and the second half performance they put in was sensational, right? Like really, really, really good. And I know that obviously they have their issues here, and obviously Ryan Flamingo has to go off early, and it all just felt all over the place from that point onwards. And yes, they have major injuries themselves, but you kind of look at that kind of thing. Mostly that's in the forward department. Mostly that's in the creative department, right? You're looking at obviously Malik Tillman being out, and yes, they haven't got many options up front at the moment because Lucas Perez isn't registered for this, and obviously Ricardo Pepi is out for the rest of the season. But with all of that said, Perisic basically said before this game, he's like, we need to pull ourselves together. We need to absolutely, look at this and think, where are we? We need to get a grip of ourselves. I do wonder if we've just come to the end of another Peter Bosz era, because this happens at the end of Bosz eras. Like, he goes through phases where his teams look unbelievably good, especially from an attacking perspective. And then everything just seems to collapse. Now, it's taken longer than usual with this PSV side, who have been very good for a number of years. But this felt like the kind of nadir of all of it. And if they lose the title, which I think they're going to, and they're out of all of the cups at this point, you do wonder if he keeps his job beyond the end of this season, considering where they were like at the turn of the year and where they've ended up in March.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely fair. I mean, they just looked totally bewildered and lost. You know, they were losing track of their runners. There was that one goal where they're all falling over each other. Flamingo was one of them who literally fell over. Malacia fell over. I can't even remember who ended up scoring it, that one, because there's so many goals. But it was honestly laughable. There's a goal where Noah Lang's having to track back and he's lost his man, and it's like, oh my goodness, we shouldn't be in this situation like 20 minutes into the first half where Lang's getting caught out like this and having to worry about going backwards. But Arsenal just controlled the game. The positive for Arsenal particularly is, apart from the fact that they've remembered how to score 7 goals in a game, is Odegaard. I mean, Odegaard with some of the most sublime play you could wish to see on a field, particularly his last assist, like this lovely little prodded pass, which was absolutely beautiful to watch, like pure Odegaard at his best. And we haven't seen Odegaard at his best for enough of this season. And it'll be interesting to see, now that he's been able to feel that again. You know, it's felt by the end of this game, it was a little bit like men against boys, really. It's like if you were the older kids at school and you're playing against the year like below, a couple of years below you, and it just becomes a little bit too easy because they all get a bit tired and can't keep up. That's how Odegaard was treating it by the end. Obviously, he got a couple of goals for himself, but I think more than anything, especially going into a game at Old Trafford, Arsenal needs to carry this into that game and actually produce a big result. Not necessarily that it changes whether they win the Premier League, but just to show people what they're made of and give themselves even more belief as they move on through the season. Because it could be that the Champions League ends up being the thing that means the most for them. Obviously, they've still got potential here, given the players that they've got to return. Right? Don't forget, we've still got the likes of Saka to come back into the team. We're not too far away from that now. So this was really positive in that aspect, because it means that they can relax a little bit, knowing that, okay, we are going to get into a situation. We're in the Champions League and we have our best player back.
Yeah, we're in the Champions League quarterfinals. Like there is 0.001% chance.
How annoyed are you if you're a PSV fan who's already booked a trip to London? Yeah, I mean, I'll be fuming. Would you go? That's the question. Would you go?
You probably use it as an excuse. His way.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah, I imagine there are going to be some people looking at maybe cancelling the hotels and flights at this point. I think they would be rightly frustrated with the performance of their team last night. All right, let's wrap quickly with the other 2 games that happened last night. Aston Villa won 3-1 at Club Brugge, which is a really impressive result. And there were some really nice storylines within this for Aston Villa. One, Tyrone Mings, who obviously gave away that ridiculous goal against Club Brugge in the league stage by handling the ball after it had been goal kick. It was a goal kick. I think Unai Emery described that at the time as the biggest mistake I've ever seen in my entire football career. And I was like, wow, okay, that's pretty harsh at this point. But Mings last night got his redemption, which was nice. He got a headed assist for the Leon Bailey goal that opens the scoring very, very early on for Aston Villa. And also there, he gets this wonderful clearance off the line. And it's really enjoyable because he's speaking about afterwards and he's watching it back. And he's like, yeah, I don't even know I did that, to be honest. You're like, yeah, fantastic, amazing. Just threw himself at it and made a crucial interception or a block to stop Club Brugge scoring. But on the kind of flip side, you look at it and you think, okay, Villa have now won 6 of their 9 games in the Champions League thus far this season. That's very, very impressive. And the way that they went about their business, especially towards the end of this game, was impressive. I thought they were a little bit lucky. And I think that there was probably a sense here. And if you're Club Brugge and you're Nicky Hyen, who basically said afterwards to his team on the pitch, go and do that again, because that performance was worthwhile, and it was a good performance, and there were some major opportunities for them to take the lead at 1-1, where you get these kind of moments in a game. You're thinking about it. There was a Vanaken one that is very, very close, and then obviously Christos Solis screams one over from about 12 yards, and you're like, those are the moments you have to take in games like this, especially against an Unai Emery unit. I think that the own goal that makes it 2-1 is incredibly unlucky. It's a great ball across from Morgan Rogers, but defender's completely and utterly, there's nothing he can do about it whatsoever. And I think the penalty is harsh. I think that is very, very soft in terms of how it is. But Villa will be delighted with that. Their away form's been really patchy, and they go back home to a place where they've had a much better run of things, and they will expect to be in the Champions League quarterfinals. Bear in mind, this is Villa's first Champions League knockout game for 43 years, I think, 42 years. So for them to go and get that kind of result and mean that they're going to have a little bit of a cushion, a little bit of breathing space when they come back to Villa Park, and that people can enjoy that second leg a little bit more.
That's true.
It's something pretty special. So we'll see how it kind of shakes out. But I think that you kind of look at what Villa came out of this with, and you'd imagine that they'll see it through from here, especially with Emery in charge. But I do think it's probably not as clear cut in terms of how this game went as maybe the scoreline looks.
Yeah, I mean, nice feeling to know that you could have an almost hassle-free evening in a second leg of a last 16 Champions League tie. That's great for Villa, but obviously after that they're going to be playing PSG or Liverpool, so that's something to prepare for, and also to make sure that you keep levels at a certain standard. You can't just put your foot down when it suits you. You've got to maintain standards. So that's going to be the real key for Emery, making sure the players are motivated to make sure there is no upset in that game, but also to get it won and make sure that they're ready to keep playing it. Because this is one of the problems with Villa this season, is that they have dropped off at times. I mean, we talked about it on the main episode a little bit when we were talking about who could become the next first-time Premier League winners. But it is true with Villa that we've seen some dips in form that shouldn't really be expected, but it can happen due to obviously tired legs, but also the squad rotation that has to go on in these moments. So interesting to see what they do. Brentford away for Aston Villa at the weekend is actually a pretty difficult game, and they are 10th in the Premier League at the moment, Aston Villa. It's not like that's not really okay considering where they are in the Champions League. I know it's difficult to strike that balance, but they lose to Brentford, then Brentford basically catch them in the league table, and suddenly you're considering, are we going to end up in the bottom half of the Premier League this season? And then, so if you do end up losing to PSG, Liverpool in the quarterfinals, and then you're languishing, you're suddenly looking back on it, and it doesn't feel like that good a season by the time you're scrapping away and you're out of Europe. So a difficult moment here for Emery to manage, I think.
Yeah, I mean, look, they're also obviously in the FA Cup quarterfinals, so there is a potential route to silverware and Europe via the FA Cup.
Yeah, and they should get through in that route. That's true. Yeah.
So there is that to consider as well. But
again, that might affect their league form too. So all the more important these cup competitions to do well.
Yeah. There's a lot to manage for Unai Emery right now. The final game was a 1-1 draw between Borussia Dortmund and Lille, and I think Borussia Dortmund will be kicking themselves after this one. Lille scored with their first shot on target in the second half. Great finish. But Borussia Dortmund, much the better side in the first half, took the lead through Karim Adeyemi, should have doubled, trebled that advantage before half-time. And what was really weird about this, I thought, was the intensity that Borussia Dortmund have been really impressive with in that first half. And look, been able to bounce off the back of back-to-back wins in the Bundesliga, that hammering of Union Berlin, and then winning at St. Pauli at the Milan tour. You're like, okay, cool. All right, is this actually the point where things start to turn around for Borussia Dortmund? And, in the first half of this one, you're thinking, okay, yeah, there is a lot here which we can maybe take into account and which we can move forward with. And Borussia Dortmund will fancy themselves to see it from here. But the drop-off in that second half is kind of typical of where they've been all season, right? You get these moments of excellence, of magic, which have mostly come in the Champions League, but the lack of consistency, not just game to game, but within a game, that allows Lille to fight their way back into this as a contest. They score the goal then, and suddenly it's like, oh, do Lille basically have the advantage taking this back to France? So a weird one, I think, from a Borussia Dortmund perspective. Lille will be very pleased with the fact that they've come out of this with a 1-1 draw, I think, and they will now look to obviously hammer home that advantage at home. They've been very, very good in France. This Champions League campaign, there's a reason they finished in the top 8, and I think that they have the tools to hurt a lot of different sides. This is a team that have come out on top of both the Madrid sides, who have absolutely punished Feyenoord 6-1 when Feyenoord were a lot better than what they showed tonight. This Lille side know how to score goals. They know how to put a team to the sword at home. And I do worry for Dortmund that they will look back at not taking their chances in the first leg, the first half of the first leg, dropping off in that second half. And this will be something they come to regret.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I kind of hope Lille make them pay for it, and I hope Lille go through. It just feels like Dortmund will get away with it until they don't get away with it. And then when they do, it's like, oh, well, we all knew it was coming. Well, let's just get it out the way. And let's just give Lille a shot at trying to make it through to the semi-finals and see whether they can, in that next quarter-final, what do they get? Barcelona, Benfica. So, give them their big day. This is a Lille team that is probably at the end of its cycle. And I feel like for them to have that big occasion would actually be quite fitting if it was to be Barcelona and you get like a big Champions League night where you're like, okay, this is it. Like, let's all go for it. Like, we've been through a lot together.
Jonathan David's live audition tape.
Yeah, well, basically, yes. Am I going to join Barcelona, basically? Or am I ending up at West Ham? But that's, they're a good team. They've become a very good team together, and it's clear that the writing's on the wall for a lot of them, and 4, probably maybe even 5 have ended up leaving. But that's okay. That can happen. But I'd love to see the opportunity for them to have that Barcelona tie to see whether they can make it a historic end and go even further.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're probably right. Like, there's probably an argument. Pep Genesio, the best Pep at the moment. With what he's doing this Lille side. So fair play. Lille dug in that first half and then made Borussia Dortmund pay in the second. So that one's quite nicely poised as well. So there's a couple of very intriguing ties, even if a few of them, as we think, are done and dusted.
Also like to see Ethan Mbappe up against Barcelona, by the way. That'd be nice.
Maybe he joins. maybe that's the drama that the Classico needs to further ignite things at this point. That would be quite something, wouldn't it? But with that, I think it's probably time for us to call it a day. So what's left for me to do is say thank you very much to Mr. Dean Jones.
Cheers, mate.
I've been Jack Collins. This has been Champions League Takeaway here on Ranks AFC. Thank you so much for listening as ever. The Truth will be back on Friday. Doogie is back from his holidays. So Sam and Doogie back together talking about Manchester United and this question of if Ruben Amorim has made this side worse and what the future looks like. So lots to get stuck into on that one. But from us and for now, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you all very shortly. Take it easy, gang. Peace. Hello, Rag Squad. When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Aloe or Allbirds or Aviator Nation, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand and brilliant marketing, but an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the businesses, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify, who are home of the #1 checkout on the planet. And the not-so-secret secret with Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning that there are way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going... So, if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling, on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. It's no secret. Businesses that want to grow with Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/ranks, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/ranks to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/ranks.